Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are tearing into a fascinating stack of sources surrounding a cybersecurity firm called BlockSmith. Now, if you are expecting the usual discussion of, firewalls, perimeter defense, and threat intelligence, brace yourself, because this company is operating on an entirely different plane. Their sources, they read more like a manifesto for human dignity than a technical white paper.
It's an absolutely radical shift, and that's why this deep dive is so necessary. For decades, cybersecurity has been structured around military metaphors, defense, offense, high walls, and this sort of castle mentality. BlockSmith, on the other hand, explicitly centers its entire architectural design around concepts that sound wholly foreign to the industry. Things like kindness, sovereignty, and human dignity.
Kindness, that's the one that jumps out.
Right. They're arguing that security should fundamentally be a human right, not some kind of complexity burden or a premium upgrade you have to pay for.
And that is the central paradox we need to unravel today. How do you integrate a concept like pure kindness into something as unforgiving as cryptographic infrastructure? Our mission is to unpack this philosophy of post-breach resilience and explore exactly how BlockSmith's core systems, the Playon suite, and specifically YUP function, based on their incredibly bold tagline.
The nothing stored, nothing to steal line.
Exactly. Post-breach security made simple. Nothing stored, nothing to steal. We need to find out what nothing stored truly means for digital identity architecture.
Precisely. And this is not fluffy marketing. This is a deliberate foundational engineering philosophy. If we can understand how they translate kindness into an architectural constraint, we understand how their technology achieves resilience after a breach has already happened, which is, a far cry from the industry standard of just trying to prevent the breach in the first place.
Okay, so let's start with the foundation, the worldview that's driving all of this. They seem to be reacting to what they see as a fundamental crisis of trust in our current digital world.
Yeah, that's the core of it.
And I love the framing that modern technology often feels like a cage. It's rigid, it demands constant data extraction, and it just erodes trust. It leads to a loss of, awareness and nuance. They seem to believe the current state of digital security is fundamentally corrosive to the human spirit.
They do. They argue that the relentless pursuit of speed, efficiency, and seamlessness in technology actually makes us lose consciousness. We stop observing the subtleties, we lose the human connection.
So the goal of their tech isn't just protecting data.
No, it's protecting human dignity itself. They want technology to ensure we don't rust our hearts. They use that beautiful analogy of the Tin Man in The Wizard of Oz losing his capacity to feel.
That analogy, the Tin Man, is so compelling, but let's connect it back to the technical world for a second. How does technology rust our hearts today?
Well, think about the attention economy. It's literally designed to keep us scrolling, to keep us reacting. It prevents us from slowing down or genuinely connecting. And when security is painful, when you have 10 different complex passwords, invasive MFA, this constant fear of being breached, it becomes a taxing burden that further degrades trust.
It just adds another layer of anxiety to your digital life.
Exactly. So BlockSmith's core tenet is that if technology is designed correctly, it should free us, allowing us to regain that consciousness. This is why their non-negotiable belief is that security is a human right, not a premium feature. It has to protect the human, not just the data ledger.
That's a really powerful reframing. And they define this design mandate not just as abstract ethics, but as a concrete engineering principle they call pure kindness. This is the part that sounds most abstract. What does pure kindness even look like when you're writing cryptographic code?
Well, when translated into infrastructure, they define pure kindness as a conscious intention to serve a greater good.
Yes.
It's about ensuring that technology's operation always aligns with human dignity, agency, and deep trust. It becomes a real architectural constraint. If a design choice undermines user sovereignty or requires excessive data collection, it's rejected. Period. Doesn't matter how efficient it is.
So they're deliberately moving beyond systems built on fear and surveillance.
Toward building what they call sanctuaries, not surveillance.
I like that. Sanctuaries, not surveillance. So the output of kind infrastructure is systems that are deeply consensual, that prioritize psychological safety right alongside data integrity. This immediately brings up the idea of governance and trust, which they tie back to, of all people, Rousseau and the social contract.
Yes, this is a fascinating historical connection. Rousseau, in his work, suggested that for a government to be perfect, he said, il faudrait être un dieu pour gouverner. You have to be a god to govern men properly. It was an expression of skepticism about centralized human authority.
Okay, so how do they take that old political challenge and apply it to the digital age?
Well, they argue that today, digital trust and governance don't need a single hero or, a dictator. They could be collective, transparent, and decentralized. The technology itself allows for a self-enforcing, distributed system of trust. They call it the electronic social contract.
An electronic social contract.
Yeah, and this contract isn't imposed from above by a central authority like a bank or a big tech platform. It's co-constructed and participatory through cryptographically verifiable interactions. The shift is monumental, from centralized authority dictating security to shared, distributed protocols guaranteeing sovereignty.
This philosophical view must have some profound implications for the rise of AI. What's BlockSmith's unique take on the so-called post-AI question?
They hold a very, very clear position on this. They believe that the greatest human invention isn't AI, it's what comes after AI.
Which is
a more conscious humanity and systems that have a soul. I mean, AI is incredibly powerful, yes, but it must be relegated to an assistant role. It can't be allowed to replace our judgment or our ethics, which leads them directly to their focus on digital sovereignty.
And digital sovereignty, in their context, is all about keeping the identity private.
Precisely. Because the technology should serve, not control, the identity must remain anonymous and secure. They want to verify trust based on cryptographic proof, not on personal identifiers.
All right.
They operate on the principle that we don't need to know who you are to protect you. And that is the ultimate defense of human dignity. Your protection shouldn't be conditional on handing over your personal data to some central repository. It is the technical expression of the right to be left alone.
Okay, let's move from the philosophy of kindness to the radical architecture that makes this vision technically achievable. We keep hearing this term post-breach resilience, and it feels like a total architectural rejection of the traditional security mindset.
Oh, it is. It's a profound paradigm shift, and we need to spend some time on this. Traditional security has always been about prevention, building higher, thicker walls, hoping the attackers never breach the perimeter.
Which is an inherently fragile model.
Incredibly fragile, because we know the walls will eventually be breached. BlockSmith operates on the principle of assuming compromise. They design for the day after the breach has already happened.
So if they assume the attacker gets past the perimeter, what's the new goal?
The goal isn't just to stop the attack, but to make the attack pointless. The architectural design ensures that any stolen material, any credential, any key, any data fragment has meaningless breach value. In essence, they don't try to stop the theft. They ensure the thief leaves empty-handed, or worse, with fool's gold.
That sounds great in theory, but let's look at the practice. We have a powerful, real-world example from the sources.
We do. The source material highlights a Swiss hospital, a meager target for ransomware, as you can imagine, that implemented BlockSmith's system, YUP, across their infrastructure. Over an 18-month period, they reported 0 breaches.
0 breaches, despite being attacked.
Despite enduring 3 separate confirmed ransomware attacks.
That is an astonishing result, especially for healthcare. How did the system withstand these attacks if they were operating under the assumption of compromise?
Because even when the attackers got internal access, which they did, there was nothing sensitive, nothing static, and no persistent secret material for them to exfiltrate or leverage. They couldn't formulate the cracking problem because the entire vault, the master keys, the password hashes, they just weren't there, not on the network, not on the server. The data was encrypted, and the keys needed to unlock it simply disappeared after use.
That leads us directly into the 3 core pillars of this architectural immunity, the foundation of the nothing-to-steal revolution: vaultless, hashless, and keyless. Let's start with vaultless architecture. I think this is a direct critique of the current password manager and key store industry.
It absolutely is. The traditional model, including standard enterprise password managers, it consolidates risk. They create a single, highly valuable target, the master vault, protected by a master key. If that single point of failure is compromised, all your secrets are exposed.
And BlockSmith just eliminates that vulnerability entirely.
They do. Their vaultless architecture means no secrets, no passwords, and critically, no static persistent keys are ever stored in a central repository or on a server or even on the client device.
Okay, hang on. If the credentials aren't stored anywhere, how does the system know I am me when I try to log in?
This is where the magic of derivation comes in. The credentials are derived on demand using deterministic, quantum-resistant algorithms, mostly hash-based key derivation functions, or KDFs. Think of it like this. They don't store the cake, they store the recipe and the ingredients.
Walk us through that recipe metaphor in technical terms. What are the ingredients required to generate a usable one-time key?
There are 3 critical inputs. First, you need the simple, medium entropy master secret. This is the easy-to-remember passphrase stored only in the user's head. This is the only static piece of the puzzle, and its simplicity is offset by the other factors.
Okay, what's the second ingredient?
Second, the domain name, like example.com. This ensures the derived key is unique for that specific application. And third, optional high-entropy factors like timestamps, unique device information, or server keys.
So if an attacker steals my master's secret, say, I wrote my simple passphrase down, is it useless without the domain and those other factors?
It's entirely useless. Because of the derivation process, the simple master secret is just one variable in a complex cryptographic function. Without knowing the target domain, the unique device ID, and the real-time server factors, the attacker can't reproduce the final high-entropy credential. And since the credential is computed, not retrieved, it's also securely erased after use. It's ephemeral. You log in, access data, and when you log out, that specific key just vanishes. No syncing, no files, no persistent keys to steal.
That addresses the vault, but you also mentioned their explicitly hashless architecture. Now, we know that even systems that don't store the raw password still store a hash, a secure one-way fingerprint of the password for comparison during authentication. Why is eliminating the hash still necessary, even in a vaultless system?
This is a critical distinction that many listeners might miss. Stored hashes are the critical material attackers need to formulate the cracking problem. Even if they are salted and stretched, a powerful attacker with time and resources, or increasingly GPUs, can take those hashes offline and conduct massive offline brute force attacks. They can run billions of guesses per second against those hashes until they find a match for the original password.
So by being hashless, BlockSmith eliminates the raw material needed for that massive computational attack.
Exactly. The hashless design ensures that no password hash is stored on the server at all. By removing the stored hash, BlockSmith forces the authentication process to rely exclusively on a live, interactive challenge-response mechanism. The server sends a challenge, the client uses the derived secret to provide a unique cryptographic response, and the server validates it without ever knowing or storing the secret itself. This makes offline cracking effectively impossible because the material needed to start the attack just doesn't exist on the server side.
And the final piece of this triple elimination is keyless authentication. If we are vaultless, no stored secret, and hashless, no stored fingerprint, what are we eliminating with keyless?
Keyless refers specifically to the session keys used for ongoing access. Vaultless refers to the absence of the long-term secret material. Keyless refers to the dynamic nature of the keys used right now. Authentication keys are dynamically generated on the fly for each login session. As soon as the session ends or the key is no longer needed, it's securely erased.
Which means if an attacker somehow manages to intercept the communication and grabs a session key, they still gain nothing.
That's the key insight. The intercepted key is specific to that millisecond, that device, and that specific session. It expires instantly and cannot be used to forge a new session or gain future access. It has meaningless breach value. Think of it as a physical key that dissolves into dust the moment you finish unlocking the door. This design also provides built-in protection against the emerging threat of quantum computing, as there are no static, persistent secrets for Shor's algorithm to target.
That is a perfect transition into the most advanced concept mentioned in these sources: anonymous security via the Xenix framework. This moves beyond just protecting the keys. It seems to be about generating uncertainty for the attacker.
Anonymous security is really the culmination of these three pillars. It ensures security is achieved without needing to know the user's identity. They just verify cryptographic proof of the derived key. But the layer of quantum resilience they introduce with Xenix is, well, it's astonishing. BlockSmith posits they don't just use quantum-resistant algorithms, they dissolve the existential threat entirely.
How do you dissolve a mathematical problem? That sounds like science fiction.
By making the solution indeterminate. By generating plausible, persistent uncertainty. They suggest that in a breach scenario where an attacker thinks they have solved the key, every key the attacker attempts to brute force appears valid. Decryption never fails. Instead, the decryption process produces different, plausible, but ultimately false data.
Wait, hold on. So the attacker breaks in, steals an encrypted file, finds what they think is a key, and when they decrypt it, they get something that looks real but isn't.
Exactly. It creates an illusion. Attackers can brute force indefinitely, perhaps revealing 10,000 different possible outcomes, a different bank balance, a different medical record, a different name, but they will never know if they found the truth or just another system-generated illusion. The system is designed to make the false data indistinguishable from the true data. This is the ultimate expression of meaningless breach value. The problem isn't just hard to solve. It's impossible to formulate because the target is constantly shifting or disguised by its own defense mechanism. The attacker loses because they can't distinguish noise from signal.
Okay, this technology sounds incredibly complex, almost designed for cryptographers. Yet BlockSmith's mission is to make security parent-friendly. That's where YUP, your unphishable presence, is meant to bridge the gap. We know the major challenge for security is user friction. Users hate complex passwords. They hate intrusive MFA. So how does YUP reconcile deep complexity with radical ease of use?
YUP is designed to be radically frictionless. The fundamental innovation is shifting the burden of complexity entirely away from the human and onto the system. Users are encouraged to employ simple, easy-to-remember passwords, that medium entropy master secret we discussed, and the system transforms them into something cryptographically impenetrable behind the scenes.
But if I use a simple password like Summer123, an attacker will guess that instantly. How does YUP achieve security with simple, memorable input?
This is where we talk about the unbreakable password system. YUP takes that simple passphrase and, through advanced KDFs, transforms it into a credential with exponentially higher entropy. The key ingredient that expands the possibilities is the Unicode secret.
Ah, the emojis. I love this. But let's clarify for the listener, what is entropy and why does expanding the character set matter so much?
Entropy, in simple terms, is the measure of randomness or unpredictability. A password's strength isn't just about its length, it's about the size of the alphabet you can choose from. Most traditional systems are based on 7-bit ASCII, maybe 95 characters, letters, numbers, symbols. That's a small alphabet.
Okay.
YUP leverages a vast character set, expanding the encoding to 12 bits, which includes thousands of Unicode characters, emojis, mathematical symbols, characters from non-Latin scripts, everything.
So instead of choosing from 95 characters, you're choosing from approximately 4,096 possible characters.
Exactly. That massive expansion doesn't change the user's simple input, but it exponentially increases the number of combinations available for the derived password. This makes offline brute force cracking computationally infeasible, even if the user's original simple master secret was known. The complexity burden is entirely shifted from you having to remember a random 20-character string to the system having a massive character space to play with during derivation.
That deals with the risk of cracking, but the biggest threat today is still phishing, where the user willingly hands over their password to a malicious site. How does YUP ensure truly unphishable authentication?
This is the genius of the behavioral layer. YUP integrates typing biometrics and behavioral analysis directly into the authentication process. It doesn't just check what you type. It checks the cryptographic signature of how you type it. Your unique rhythm, speed, dwell time on keys, patterns of deletion or correction. This forms a unique, highly sensitive typing fingerprint.
Okay, let's imagine I get phished. I go to a fake bank website and obediently type my simple password, Summer123. The attacker now has those characters. Why can't they just replay those characters to the real bank site and log in?
Because the simple characters are not enough. The authentication process is cryptographic handshake that requires the correct timing sequence, the behavioral signature, to generate the required ephemeral session key. The attacker can copy the characters, but they cannot replicate your unique physical rhythm, your typing speed, and minute delays with cryptographic precision. If the credentials are sent without that specific behavioral signature tied to your device, the system instantly deems the attempt fraudulent, even though the characters are technically correct.
That is a staggering claim. The sources suggest users could theoretically go back to safely writing their simple passwords on Post-it notes.
It's a deliberate, provocative claim, but it highlights the profound statement about the system security model. The master secret alone is useless. An attacker must not only possess the secret, but also replicate the precise physical, biometric timing and rhythm of the legitimate user. Any abnormal behavior, whether it's the lack of the typing biometric signature, an unusual device context, or a different geographical location, triggers a silent alarm or an elevation of security requirements before access is granted.
Okay, let's go back to a challenge I think the listener is considering right now. If the entire recovery mechanism relies on the user remembering their simple passphrase, the master secret, isn't that just replacing a technological vulnerability with a memory vulnerability?
That is a very astute question, and it goes to the heart of the design philosophy. BlockSmith accepts that risk, but mitigates it heavily. The master secret is medium entropy precisely because it's meant to be easily memorable. But remember, the simple secret alone cannot log you in. It has to be combined with the high entropy factors, the device ID, the domain, the real-time server-side entropy. An attacker who steals or guesses the master secret still has to guess millions of combinations of the other required factors, all while trying to replicate an impossible behavioral signature. The simple secret is the resilient, no-lockout recovery mechanism, but it is cryptographically worthless in isolation.
That distinction is crucial. Now let's look at the current industry trend. Passkeys. Passkeys were created specifically to solve phishing, but they introduced a major problem, the no-key, no-access lockout problem, relying entirely on a specific device. How does YUP position itself relative to passkeys?
Yeah, passkeys are good because they eliminate password theft, but they create a fragility paradox. If your device breaks or the key isn't synced correctly, you're locked out. Full stop. YUP doesn't fight passkeys, it fortifies them. Through its dynamic derivation process, it can act as a virtual passkey.
What does that mean in practical terms?
It means YUP provides the same cryptographic proof needed for authentication as a standard FIDO passkey, but it guarantees a no-lockout design. If you lose your device, you simply go to a new authorized device, recall your master secret, that simple passphrase, and the system securely regenerates the virtual key on the new device. It combines the master secret with the new device's unique identifiers and the real-time server entropy. This breaks the dependency on permanent device-stored secrets, offering the resilience that passkeys lack.
We've focused mostly on identity, but the Pleona suite also deals with data protection at rest, inside the databases. How do they apply the meaningless breach value principle to sensitive user data, like personally identifiable information?
They utilize zero-knowledge tokenization, or ZTO. When sensitive PII data is input into a database, it is instantly replaced with undecodable tokens. If that database is breached, the attacker steals a massive volume of these tokens. But critically, these tokens are cryptographically segregated from the original data and are intrinsically valueless to the attackers. They can't be reversed, unlike traditional encrypted databases where the keys are often stored nearby.
And what about the threat of ransomware, which is still crippling organizations worldwide?
For ransomware, they incorporate RWEL, which stands for Ransomware Elimination Protection. It uses ephemeral block-based encryption. Data is constantly being encrypted, even during processing. Only a minimal transient portion of the data block is exposed at any given time within secured RAM when it's needed for a specific process. This ensures that the exposure footprint is minimal and transient, drastically limiting the damage a ransomware attack could inflict before being stopped.
Okay, we've covered the architecture of kindness and the architecture of resilience. Now we move to the architecture of intention, specifically, a profound new programming paradigm called IRP, which stands for Implicit Reference to Parameters. This sounds like it's straight out of advanced quantum computing research.
It's deep computer science, for sure. It draws inspiration from fields like quantum chemistry and complex self-organizing systems. And IRP is necessary because traditional programming paradigms are fundamentally ill-suited for managing millions of dynamic, ephemeral dependencies, like the ones needed for BlockSmith's keyless-derived credentials. Traditional coding is just too rigid and brittle.
Walk us through the traditional model first so we understand the problem.
In conventional object-oriented programming, you operate bottom-up. You have to explicitly define and push all parameters and dependencies manually. You list every required module, every variable, every dependency link before you execute the function. If one dependency is missing or its state changes unexpectedly, the whole system breaks. It's fragile because it demands absolute explicit rigor up front.
And IRP flips this rigid model on its head.
IRP starts with the complete intent. It's top-down. The architect doesn't define how to get the dependencies, they define the goal, the desired behavior, or the intent. The system then automatically resolves and grows the dependency tree organically as it executes. Instead of the coder manually pushing all the required ingredients, the system pulls what it needs dynamically.
Let's dedicate some time to the cake analogy here. It really simplifies the distinction between traditional rigid code and this intent-first architecture.
Certainly. In the traditional model, if you want a cake, you have to write thousands of lines of code detailing every dependency. Define flour dependency, define eggs dependency, load oven module, push all variables into the mixing function. If you forget to explicitly push the sugar variable, the function fails.
Okay, and with IRP?
With IRP, you simply declare the top-level intent. I want a cake.
And because the intent is defined, the system itself figures out the steps.
Precisely. The system, based on that highest level of intent, recognizes that to execute make cake, it must pull in the flour, the sugar, the eggs, and the oven dependency, and it only pulls them in as they become necessary. This results in automatic dependency resolution, a dynamic, self-organizing codebase, and what they call a dynamic dependency graph that evolves as the program runs. The sources emphasize that without IRP to manage the millions of ephemeral secrets created and destroyed hourly by the Pleione suite, the entire philosophy of vaultless, keyless security would be computationally impossible to manage.
So IRP is the structural glue that enables the ephemeral security model. Now, let's look at how BlockSmith applies intentionality to their critique of modern AI through artificial jagged intelligence, or AGI. This is a deliberate embrace of imperfection. Why embrace jaggedness when the entire tech industry strives for seamless efficiency?
This is a deep philosophical counter-argument to surveillance capitalism. Conventional AI seeks hyper-optimization and seamlessness. But this seamlessness, while comfortable, often means eroding human autonomy through algorithmic nudges, addictive loops, or by presenting overly polished, manipulative illusions designed to extract data or attention. BlockSmith views HAI as the ethical immune system of tech.
The ethical immune system. So AGI's primary function is to inject intentional difficulty, like an ethical speed bump.
Exactly. AGI intentionally embraces friction, they call it constructive jaggedness, to force the user to remain conscious and aware. It defends human agency through intentional interruptions and anti-manipulation design. If an AI system starts making decisions too easy or starts hiding critical information to optimize a metric, AGI steps in.
Can you give us a concrete example of constructive jaggedness?
Imagine an AI interface that's constantly optimizing your search results to keep you clicking on products. AGI would deliberately, occasionally, insert results that challenge your assumed bias or force you to navigate a more complex path. It ensures the human brain stays engaged in critical thinking rather than passively following the algorithmic flow.
So it prevents technology from becoming a smooth, slippery slope toward manipulation.
It ensures technology remains jagged enough to keep us awake, aware, and alive to what matters. It surfaces biases and embraces dissent, acting as a deliberate counterbalance to hyper-optimization. This is crucial, especially because the sources note that BlockSmith uses AI heavily for accelerated coding and efficiency.
That's right. They use AI-trained MVP coding for speed to overcome their resource limitations as a lean startup. If they use AI for speed, how do they ensure the final product adheres to the ethical constraints of AGI?
That's the management structure. The AI handles the speed and the rapid prototyping, but they stress the non-negotiable need for human oversight to ensure ethics and rigor. AGI provides the framework for that human oversight. The distinction is key. Traditional AI gives answers efficiently. AGI asks better, more ethical questions and forces human judgment to stay in the loop.
Okay, we've established that BlockSmith has revolutionary technology and a powerful philosophy rooted in dignity. Now let's talk business. Who are they targeting, and why is this technology essential for them right now, especially given the current cybersecurity landscape?
Their mission is to make security frictionless for all, which means democratizing enterprise-grade protection. Their primary focus is on small and medium-sized enterprises, SMEs, and government institutions.
Why them specifically?
Because these organizations often lack the specialized expertise, the budget, or the massive resources needed for complex traditional security systems. They are the easy targets for organized cybercrime.
And we have a chilling, real-world anecdote that perfectly illustrates the lethal consequence of relying on those old security models, the K&P logistics case. We need to pause and reflect on this as it demonstrates the human cost of poor security architecture.
This story is tragic, and it just underscores the urgency of post-breach resilience. K&P Logistics was a massive 158-year-old UK haulage and logistics firm. It was brought entirely to its knees, resulting in a total collapse and the loss of 700 jobs, all because of the Akira ransomware gang.
And the root cause was shockingly simple.
It is traced back to a single critical vulnerability: a weak, predictable password. The attacker was able to simply log in, gain admin rights, and deploy the ransomware across the entire network. 700 lives disrupted, a massive legacy destroyed, all due to one vulnerable piece of static data.
And BlockSmith argues that YUP would have stopped the attack cold.
Absolutely. The fatal flaw in the K&P case was relying solely on the password as the authentication factor. Even if the attacker had obtained that weak password, YUP requires that unique, derived, cryptographic signature tied to the employee's specific device, plus their highly personalized behavioral signature, the typing biometrics.
So the attacker, trying to use the stolen password from a remote server, would have been instantly denied access long before they could deploy the payload.
Precisely. The system would have instantly detected the anomaly, the lack of the required typing pattern, the unusual device context, and triggered a silent alarm, blocking the access attempt. The breach value of that single weak password, even if stolen, would have been zero. This shifts the blame and the liability away from the employee who made a simple mistake and onto a system design that failed to protect them.
That successful real-world prevention is what enables their highly disruptive, success-based pricing model. It fundamentally flips the standard cybersecurity business model on its head.
It really does. The standard cybersecurity market thrives on fear. You pay massive invoices up front, regardless of whether the system actually protects you. BlockSmith decided to flip the script entirely by aligning their financial success directly with the client's survival. They offer a success-based pricing model with a clear promise. No upfront costs, no monthly subscriptions, and absolutely no payment until the value is proven.
Wait, that sounds incredibly risky for a startup. How do they handle cash flow if they only get paid after a non-event? I mean, they only get paid if the client doesn't get breached.
That is the critical skeptical question, and the sources address it. They mitigate volatility by using performance fees. Payment is often a small fraction of the avoided breach cost, or a fraction of the client's protected revenue stream. For example, they might charge up to 20% of a client's protected annual revenue, or 15% of the revenue generated through the specific solution.
So if they protect a $10 million revenue stream that would have been wiped out by ransomware, BlockSmith takes a percentage of that protected $10 million.
Exactly. Their financial incentive is directly aligned with the client's security outcome and financial survival. It's an insurance model built on performance. They're essentially telling clients, we will ensure your financial viability with our technology, and you only pay us a sliver of the value we successfully protected. It's protect first, charge later.
They need early traction, though. Given the complexity of implementing the full Pleoni suite, what is their strategic entry point into the market?
They realize that selling a radical new identity framework is a long educational journey. So their strategic decision was to focus initially on a smaller, immediate pain point, certificate management, or CERT. This is a technical entry point that offers fast, quantifiable value.
Why certificate management?
Because of recent industry changes, certificate lifespans are shortening, meaning organizations have to renew more frequently. When manual processes fail, the whole system goes down, a massive, expensive operational pain point. This addresses a huge gap in the market.
And their product here is called WACE, Watcher for Automated Certificate Expiry.
WACE is designed to be the fastest way to get early proofs of concept in customers. WACE monitors certificate renewals, and if a renewal fails, due to a billing error or a technical issue, WACE instantly issues a temporary fallback certificate. It offers a 45-day paid CERT failover coverage. This prevents catastrophic website or service outages, solving an immediate, quantifiable operational pain point without requiring the client to overhaul their entire security architecture day one. It proves BlockSmith's reliability and intent before they introduce the deeper concepts.
Finally, let's detail the major challenges they recognize for their own growth.
The sources outline 3 key challenges typical for deep tech pioneers. First, market education is massive. They have to teach clients about a security paradigm post-breach that is entirely new. Second, securing consistent funding and resources remains an issue for a lean team challenging established giants. They mitigate this by leveraging their AI-trained MVP coding for speed. And third, talent acquisition is crucial. They need acute expertise and rigor in cryptography, but that expertise must be balanced by a collaborative, curious spirit people who believe philosophically that security is rooted in trust, not fear.
This has been an incredibly deep dive into a company that is clearly running 2 parallel massive revolutions. We have the architectural shift, vaultless, hashless, and keyless identity that transforms static secrets into worthless artifacts. And then we have the philosophical shift centered on kindness, intention, IRP, and human agency, AJI.
And the power of BlockSmith lies in the synthesis of those 2 paths. They aren't just selling a new firewall. They're fundamentally redefining the nature of what is being protected. By turning static secrets into dynamic, ephemeral computational proofs, they eliminate the target entirely. BlockSmith isn't selling fear and complexity. They are selling the ultimate peace of mind. The guarantee that even if an attacker gets in, they leave empty-handed. This redefines security as an empowering, low-friction, and profoundly human experience.
We have explored how the idea of intent drives secure architecture and code with IRP, ensuring that the system is self-organizing and robust, and how that same intention drives ethical systems with AJI, maintaining human agency against algorithmic manipulation. Now, for you, our listener, we leave you with this final provocative thought, tying BlockSmith's philosophy back to your own life and organizations.
BlockSmith starts its design process by defining the highest level of intent before pulling in the dependencies. So consider your own life or your organization's highest aspirations. What is your top-level function, your deepest purpose, and what dependencies do you need to pull in to support it, aligning your personal design with that purpose and kindness? The ultimate challenge, whether in architecture or in life, is moving from a fragile, push-based dependency model toward resilient, intent-first sovereignty.